Well, Nathan, you know what the perception on Notre Dame football has been, and regardless of how much of a turnaround we've witnessed and how it could conclude, those losses against Marshall and Stanford really were perplexing to say the
Yeah.
least. But as you take us through Marcus Freeman's first voyage there in South Bend, taking the rough start into account, where do you think this team stands?
Yeah, so I mean the way I've kind of described the season is the team's been kind of bipolar for the most part. So like they play like when they play some of these. I mean, I don't want to say bad opponents necessarily, but when they play some of the, the weaker teams on their schedule, they've kind of played down to them. And then when you look at their, the teams that they've played that are better, UNC, Ohio State, obviously Clemson, Syracuse obviously was ranked when they played, and BYU same thing, was ranked when they played them. They played much better, and obviously, and then you get the Boston College game this week where they kind of finally put things together against one of those teams that haven't had a good season. So, overall, I mean, the team has a lot of talent. It's really been a kind of a bummer just because of the quarterback position and some other factors, at play. And, I'm sure Marcus Freeman's first year as the head coach, some other things, factor into that as well. But, the team can pretty much hang with anybody if they have their best day. If they're running the ball well, the offensive line's playing well, the defense is fine. And then obviously, you have Drew Pine not turning the football over, or something like that, and just kind of playing a normal game. They can pretty much hang in there with pretty much anybody that they would play outside of maybe a college football playoff team. That's kind of my perception of the team overall. But no, it's been an interesting ride, and it's obviously ended on a pretty positive note. And I think even if they were to lose to USC and kind of finish the season 8-4, most Notre Dame fans are pretty excited about what's the future to come for under Marcus Freeman.
So Nathan, the two games I'm interested in terms of serving as a comparison or kind of a measuring stick relative to USC, Ohio State and Clemson. Like those are the other two really big name opponents that Notre Dame has played this season. And of course, the Ohio State game, that's going to be a comparison point in the Heisman race with you have Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud both playing Notre Dame. So that's going to be just an obvious Heisman component. So when you look at how Notre Dame played Ohio State and CJ Stroud and played them extremely well, what has changed, if anything, for Notre Dame's defense? Like this is the strength of the team. Like the drama has been almost entirely on the offensive side of the ball. You got great defense. You also have great special teams with Brian Mason, but focusing on the defense and how it contained CJ Stroud and Ohio State's offense in week one. Like, how much can we carry over from a week one game going up against Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley? Like, how much is there really to carry over from the beginning of the season here to the end of the season in terms of the expectations for this Notre Dame defense?
I mean, the Notre Dame defense has been pretty steady all year. I think the one thing that, at least from the question marks going into the season and how they played against Ohio State, you got to look at the secondary. I mean, I don't know if you guys have talked about this yet. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to listen at the beginning of the show, but Benjamin Morrison, who's a true freshman corner for Notre Dame, has 5 interceptions on the season. 3 of those came against Boston College, 2 came against Clemson. And he kind of took over the starting role about maybe a fourth or maybe kind of halfway through the season, I guess. And he's just been a stalwart there. So a really good player. And then across the secondary after that, they just have a bunch of veterans. So that's kind of been the biggest thing for them, is getting that secondary to be able to compete against these teams who do have terrific, not only quarterbacks, but wide receiver play. And that's obviously something that USC has. It's something that North Carolina has, and they did pretty well. If you look at North Carolina, the stats in that game, Drake May didn't throw for a high percentage. He had some yardage, he had some touchdowns, but they kind of held him in check from a completion percentage standpoint. And that's sort of a similar thing against Ohio State. They kind of kept Ohio State in check for the majority of the game. And then towards the end of the game, when Notre Dame's defense got a little bit tired because their offense didn't really do the work, they were essentially able to run all over them in the fourth quarter. And that's how they put up their points. They didn't really put up, CJ Stroud had a few like Heisman worthy plays, or just, that number one pick in the draft type of plays that kind of extended some drives late as well. But it was really the running game for them. And, ever since then, with the Notre Dame offense getting into check at least a little bit, it's not, necessarily a strength of theirs per se, but with them being able to put up points against some of the better teams on their schedule, their defense hasn't had to see the field as much as it did early on in the season when they did lose to, Marshall, for example. And then when they had to, even though they only gave up, 16 points against Stanford, it felt like their defense was on the field way too much. And it just, became a factor in some of those games. So I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for. I'll be honest with you. I came in here expecting to sort of talk more about the North Carolina game, because I think that actually matches up well with the way USC is sort of built. They're kind of like, I guess, UNC on steroids. It's kind of the way I would describe it. And that's where I think Notre Dame matches up well against USC, because I do think they're going to be able to run the football. I do think they're going to be able to keep USC in check more so than other teams on the USC schedule have been. To be completely honest with you, I don't see USC putting up like 40 points in this game, which they've done against most of their opponents. And I think Notre Dame is going to be able to control a lot of the clock, assuming they play a good football game. So if I was going to look at a game plan from either perspective, it would be the UNC game plan for Notre Dame.
Yeah, you led into a few of the questions that I was thinking of. First, how many minutes time of possession do you think Notre Dame needs to hit in terms of a target to win this game? I'm thinking at least 38 for Notre Dame to win this game.
Yeah, I would say, for sure in the 30s. But they're an interesting team because they do control the time of possession, and obviously their running game is a big factor why. But there are times where their running game also scores quickly. And then at the end of the game, they kind of just wear you down to where they don't necessarily have, the time of possession that you would think. But their offensive line and their running backs are just so physical that in the fourth quarter, you can see the defense of the other team getting tired, and then they do 3 and outs. Notre Dame might even throw some 3 and outs in there as well, or some, 6 or 7 and outs where they don't hold the ball for so long. But some of that physicality just really wears on some teams. So I would probably, I would definitely say in the 30s. I don't know if it has to be in the upper 30s, but I think we're in a similar boat there for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Now USC, that USC's been having an amazing year in terms of turnover differential, committed only for 24 takeaways. So does Notre Dame have to be plus turnovers in terms of the takeaway differential to win this game? Or if I told you right now, turnovers are going to be even in this game, does Notre Dame have to be plus turnovers to win this game?
Yeah, it's probably not the answer you want to hear. I think it could probably be even. It just kind of depends. It's more so like Notre Dame can't turn the football over. I think that's really what it comes down to. So if they both turn the ball over 3 times, that's an even that I wouldn't like, because
0-0 is what Notre Dame's would be fine with.
Yeah, or even honestly, even if it was -1, like if Drew Pine had 1 tipped interception, because he's good for a couple tips at the line of scrimmage weekly. It's just the way it is. He's 5'9".
But USC might not have Eric Gentry, who is the tip interception master, and we've really missed him the past few weeks.
Guarantee you don't need the tip master to have a tip ball against Drew Pine. It's just kind of the way it goes. He's good for 1 a game. He's not necessarily good for an interception or a turnover. One thing I'll give him credit for, even though I'm not his biggest fan, is that he's pretty savvy in the pocket. Outside of that Navy second half, he's been pretty good about avoiding sacks. And he's kind of, I hate calling him this because I'm a big Ian Book guy, but he has a little Ian Book in him when he gets outside of the pocket and can you just don't think he's going to pick up that 8 yards or something like that, but he does. So I'll give him credit for that. But when he's in the pocket and he stares down Michael Mayer like he does 35 times a game, he's good for a couple tipped balls, and some of them turn into interceptions from time to time. So I think to answer your question, I think if it's even like a 0-0, like you mentioned, or even like a -1 either way, where it's not a huge turnover battle on either side, I think either team can win that, to be honest with you.
All right, special teams. Now this is the Halloween horror show for USC going up against Notre Dame, because you might know that USC does not have a special teams coordinator, and it showed against UCLA. 2 missed field goals under 35 yards, a couple of ridiculous pooch kickoffs that gave UCLA great field position. Just, total clown car stuff. Like, Lincoln Riley thinks he can manage this, and he ain't cutting it. Not in this round. Like, everything else, Lincoln Riley is amazing. Not on special teams.
Mhm.
So you have Brian Mason, who is, teaches punt block schemes better than anyone else in the country. I frankly think he should be the Broyles Award winner. Like, really,
I think he should be a semifinalist for sure.
They've announced the semifinalists, but has any assistant coach done a better job in America anywhere this year? I don't think so. But anyway, talk about Notre Dame's special teams, and like, if USC has 4th and 3 at midfield, in late in the first, early in the second quarter, like, does USC need to avoid punting just because of what Brian Mason could do to this awful USC special teams unit?
Yeah, I mean, I would advise anybody, especially a team like USC, who 4th and 3 is very manageable for them. If it's a situation where it makes sense to go for it, I would probably go for it every time. So he's a damn good special teams coach, and it's honestly not even just in the punt blocks. Their punter is one of the best punters in the country this year. I know, like, a special teams coach doesn't necessarily have a whole lot to do with the punting and the kicking game per se. A lot of that has to do with just the player itself. But they're pretty good in all aspects. I mean, the only thing they really don't do is return kickoffs, but honestly, who really does these days? But no, I would say, if USC has punted the ball a couple times, I mean, especially with what I've at least heard, I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched too many of USC games this year. I usually keep track of them pretty well, just obviously because of the rivalry, and I live on the West Coast, so I can't stay up to see some of their stuff. But I do know that Lincoln Riley doesn't have a special teams coordinator. I've heard he's not huge on special teams, just in general. He thinks he can win with offense, defense. That's probably music to Brian Mason's ears to kind of echo what you said. So that could be a big deal. And that goes back to the turnover battle. I mean, if Notre Dame is essentially able to flip field position because they block a punt or they block a kick or whatever it may be, that's obviously something that's huge, and it gives Notre Dame a short field. It gives Pine, he doesn't have to necessarily go 80 yards or 90 yards to score a touchdown or put points on the board. And that's great for Notre Dame's offense. So that's definitely something to look for, or look into for this game. 100%.
All right. Now, where USC is extremely confident, let's flip the script and go to where USC should feel really confident in this game. USC's offensive line, when the starters are healthy, as good as any offensive line in the country. And we talked earlier before you came on, Nathan, about Andrew Voorhees and Bobby Haskins getting close to full strength. They've been banged up the past few weeks, but they were close to full strength against UCLA, and you saw the USC offense do its thing, rock and roll. So how does Marcus Freeman go about generating a pass rush, or just on a broader level, making life difficult for Caleb Williams in this game, with USC's offensive line being, all things considered, maybe not perfect shape, but in relatively good shape? What's the tactic for Marcus Freeman to break through the USC offensive line and cause some problems?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, they're pretty good at getting to quarterbacks with 4. I mean, Isaiah Foskey, one of the best defensive ends in the country. They have some good interior pass rush with Jason Adamalola, who actually missed last game, but Marcus Freeman said he's probable to play. Riley Mills is a good interior pass rusher. Justin Adamalola, who's the twin of Jason Adamalola, he starts on the strong side defensive end. So those guys know how to get to the quarterback, and it's definitely one of the better defensive lines in the country, at least in my opinion. But they also blitz a lot. They have a lot of linebackers that they blitz all the time. Maris Leofau plays closer to the line of scrimmage, and in all honesty, he's better when he's closer to the line of scrimmage. And there's a lot of rumors that he might actually flip to Viper next year, which is sort of Isaiah Foskey's spot, or at least in some kind of role for them, instead of being an off-ball linebacker. JD Bertrand is a pretty good timed blitzer. So they'll definitely throw some things his way. Al Golden has some interesting schemes that he brought in from the NFL where he does like to blitz linebackers. He'll throw a safety blitz in there every now and then, and it has burnt them from time to time, but it also has worked from time to time. He'll throw secondary blitzes outside of the safety, so corners, slot corners specifically. I think Tariq Bracy got home on Saturday against BC. So they'll definitely do some interesting scheme blitzes here and there. I guess that really answers your question. Is I think Notre Dame's pretty confident that they can get there with 4, but if not, they will blitz a decent amount as well.
So USC's offensive line, USC's offense more broadly is a USC strength. Let's talk about Notre Dame's weaknesses. One of the weaknesses that I identify in this, and quarterback's a little bit too easy because there's a lot more to an offense than the quarterback, and of course you need to look at the whole puzzle and how all the pieces fit together. I think a key weakness in this game is, where does Notre Dame get pass catching from someone other than Michael Mayer? Because he's so good, he's so transcendent, but like Notre Dame doesn't have the speed burner. And USC going against Arizona with its great wide receivers, going against UCLA with all the athleticism that the Bruins could throw at them. Notre Dame isn't as athletic, and at least doesn't have a home run threat that's going to scare USC the way other USC opponents have had. So who is if USC double teams Michael Mayer, which I would imagine Alex Grinch is going to do a reasonable amount of the time, who's the other pass catcher who needs to step up for the Fighting Irish in this game?
So I'll be honest with you. I think it actually is pretty easy, and it is a quarterback issue. I'm not huge on ripping on college players specifically because it's certainly not Drew Pine's fault. He is what he is. He got recruited to play Notre Dame. He wasn't really supposed to be the starter, but it is what it is. Braden Lenzy, for example, his stats won't show you, but he's probably having the best year of his career at Notre Dame simply because he's been open so many times and just been missed. And he is a speed burner. He's a legit, probably low 4.3 guy. And he's been overthrown, underthrown, whatever it is, several times on the season. That goes back to when Tyler Buckner was playing quarterback as well. I don't know if you watched the Navy game at all, but he had a really nice touchdown reception.
He made the Ty Prothro catch, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So that was that was a good moment for him as a, kind of a 5th-year senior. He really deserved that. But he's a guy that can definitely get open deep. And it can be hit. But you are right. They have more of the possession style receiver. Lorenzo Styles is a true sophomore. He definitely has some speed to him. He's had some drop issues this year. Definitely some hand issues. And that's been a big reason why maybe he hasn't had some of those vertical, or he hasn't really added that vertical threat for Notre Dame. They really just don't throw it to him in those situations. They kind of use them on jet sweeps and different things like that. But really, at least in recent weeks, Deion Colsey has really stepped up specifically as a third down specialist for them. He's like a 6'3", 6'4" guy that can go up and get it, more of a possession type. Jaden Thomas, kind of the same thing. He has had a few deep balls this year where he's made some big plays on. I think actually specifically against Navy in the first half, he had like a 40-yard touchdown catch. But really what I'm interested in seeing is if Tobias Merriweather plays. He's been out the last 2 games. He's a true freshman. He had a big touchdown catch against Stanford. He was starting to come on before the concussion that he got. And like I say, he's missed the last 2 games. He's one guy that not only has some size, but definitely has some speed to his game. And he can be a guy that, to be completely honest, might surprise the coach just because he's been on the field a little bit, but he only has 1 catch on the season. And it's because kind of before this, like, what was it, like 3 or 4 games into the season, wasn't playing much, then started playing, got some snaps, had the big play against Stanford, then got hurt. And it's more of a quarterback issue. And that's really the only reason he has 1 catch. But he's one guy that if he does play this week could surprise some people. And at least if you are going to double team Mayer, I'm of the opinion that they don't have necessarily the depth at wide receiver, but they certainly have some talent at wide receiver that can beat you that hasn't been utilized to the fullest extent.
Let's talk about Notre Dame's offensive line. Just in terms of charting the course of this group's evolution over the course of the season, obviously struggled to a certain extent. Again, the quarterback problems, are overshadowing everything else that's happened for the offense this season. It's hard to ignore that. But like the offensive line, with Drew Pine struggling, wasn't able to just hammer Cal, wasn't just able to, blow away the opponents that Notre Dame struggled against in the first half of the season. When Notre Dame was really struggling, I didn't, watch too much of the Irish because they weren't playing in a featured game, with all the losses they were picking up. I did pay attention to the Syracuse game. I also paid attention to the Clemson game. It seemed as though, particularly in the Syracuse game, as the lead into the Clemson game and this second half surge for the Irish, I saw Notre Dame really stepping up on the offensive line in that game. That's just kind of my impression, but I don't follow this team, with a fine tooth comb. You
Sure.
do. Well, what do you think was the moment when this offensive line became noticeably better in your estimation?
Yeah, so game one, they were missing their top guy, or at least their perceived top guy going into the season, and Jarrett Patterson. He didn't play against Ohio State, and honestly, he's probably played banged up most of the season, but as the season's gone on, he's got significantly better. The cohesion across the offensive line's gotten better. I would say it honestly started about the second half of Cal. The Cal game in itself doesn't look great. They only won 24-17 or whatever it was. But the second half, the offensive line really dominated. The running game started picking up. And then the next game was the UNC game, where obviously UNC, at least early on in the season, I don't even think they played defense. I don't know what you would call it, but it certainly wasn't defense. It's probably gotten a little bit better as the season's gone on. But they completely thrashed UNC and BYU in consecutive games, not only on the ground, but through the air. Actually, those were probably back-to-back Drew Pine's best games. And then actually outside of that, really just the Navy second half where they decided to zero blitz every single play. And it really got into Drew Pine's head. Even against Stanford, when they did lose that game, a lot of that really was the quarterback issue versus, in my opinion, the offensive line issue. So I would say it started about the second half of Cal, and it's, for the most part, it's been very good since. Honestly, I'll take it a step further. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't make it the Joe Moore Award semifinalists or finalists, whichever one came out. And I know USC did. I was a little shocked just with the way that Notre Dame's offensive line has been since the Cal game that they weren't a part of that.
Nathan Urbach here from Golden, not Domers podcast, because that would be too obvious. That doesn't make any sense. It's too obvious. Golden Homers. There's irony in there. Baseball fans, they're homers. Notre Dame homers. There you go. Yeah, I should never get that messed up. Nathan, we appreciate you being here. I've got a couple questions more from a broad scale. One being that Marcus Freeman's done a remarkable job getting off on this, getting started on this 2023 recruiting cycle. So how much does this game factor into successes as we get we are just about 3 weeks away from National Signing Day, and in regards to recruiting battles directly with USC?
I don't really think they're battling USC right now for any 2023 guys specifically. Definitely some 2024. For example, Jason Robinson is a USC commit. He was on Notre Dame's campus. I think it was this past weekend with his younger brother. I'm sure he'll be on campus for the USC when he's a SoCal kid. So I bet or at least maybe not SoCal, but he's a California kid. I'm sure he'll be on campus for the game this weekend. But just for the rest of the season, I'm not sure what they do against USC is going to matter much, whether they get a decommit here or there, or whether they add a kid here or there. They're definitely in on probably 4 or 5 kids remaining in the class. And then Peyton Bowen, who's their 5-star safety, is really the only guy that I think that they could lose that is really significant. And I don't think if they lose 59-0, for example, to USC, I don't think him leaving or staying the game will have much effect on that.
Nathan,
but regardless,
you've been on enough to anticipate this question. So, of course, Notre Dame loses that opener to Ohio State. In regards to a national profile, a lot of people jumped off, started watching other games, and kind of lost track of Notre Dame during this bit of a surge here against the likes of North Carolina, Clemson, and others. So beyond the stars, we'll take away Isaiah Foskey on the defensive side, or a Michael Mayer, and even Audric Estemi at running back. Who could be an X factor on either side of the ball for Notre Dame to pull off a slight upset?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I probably mentioned everybody on their roster when Matt was saying
True.
stuff. So, I'm a big Logan Diggs guy. If you check my Twitter feed out, Logan Diggs is probably, at least in my opinion, maybe their most valuable player outside of Michael Mayer. Just the style of running back that he is, what he does for the offense outside of running the football. He's come back from a shoulder injury this year, where if you look at his stats at the beginning of the season, they weren't amazing, but since then, he's only 302 yards away from 1,000-yard season, when he barely played the first 4 weeks of the year. And, he's kind of been the lead back starting from, maybe halfway through the season, but they still run Audric Estime a lot. They still run Chris Tyree a lot. In my opinion, he's really their most versatile back. And at this point, he's kind of their lead back. At least the guy that you 100% know is going to get the 15 to 20 carries every game. Estime kind of comes in more in spurts, where he's there for like 4 or 5 touches at a time, and he's off the field for a little bit. And then Tyree's more of a gad guy. So Logan Diggs, in my opinion, is kind of their X factor on offense. Defense, Brandon Josephs missed the last 2 games with an injury. He was the safety transfer that they had from Northwestern. Previously to that, he had a really good game against Syracuse, where he picked off a ball, and then he had another one that got called back because of a kind of a phantom hold or whatever it was. But so he was starting to really come on for them. So, I mean, if he's supposed to play this week, Marcus Freeman again said he was probable as well, along with a couple other guys, like I mentioned, Jason Adam earlier. So if he plays, he's definitely a guy that makes their secondary much better. So those are probably the 2 guys I would mention for Notre Dame.
One more, Nathan. Let me throw this one at you. Matt gave you a series of box score questions. If this, then how does this turn out? I'll give you this one. Let's take the running game off the table and say Drew Pine's got to drive at 75 yards in a comfortable amount of time, but the running game is on the shelf. There's not 4 minutes on the clock. There's 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Got to throw the ball. How confident are you in that situation, needing a touchdown down 4 that Drew Pine delivers?
I lost you for a second, Mark. I don't know if it was you or me, but you said, so if there's like 4 minutes left on the clock and they need to throw.
No. So there is not 4 minutes on the clock. The running game is off the board, off the table. It is strictly a passing situation, but there's not 13 seconds left in the game. It's comfortable time for the passing game. 90 seconds to 2 minutes, 75 yards to go, down 4, need a touchdown. Drew Pine's got the game in his hands, on his shoulders. How confident are you that he can deliver?
Not confident at all. I don't know if I could put a number on it. It's weird though. Ironically enough, they've actually had, they haven't really had that game situation yet this season where they've been, down by 3 or a touchdown or whatever to go up, to go win it or tie it at the end of the game. For that to really, like, I don't know. It's kind of a weird scenario because that hasn't really happened yet. I guess I would say, like, I wouldn't be confident, but I would also somewhat be like, okay, Michael Mayer might be able to just go make a play because he's that good. But yeah, no, overall, it's just, I wouldn't have a lot of confidence if there was, a minute and a half left in the game, like no timeouts, for example, or something like that. And, they need to put up 6 or 7 to win the game. I wouldn't necessarily be too confident.
So you want to defend a lead or have 4.5 minutes on the clock so your running game can factor in.
Yeah. Perfect world. If they're down, you have, 4 or 5 minutes to work with where you can utilize the running game to get down the field.